Every single day, you are doing something Edgar Cayce warned about, and you don't even realize it. You woke up this morning. You scrolled through your phone. You thought about yesterday's argument, tomorrow's deadline, the thing you forgot to say. You moved through your routine without questioning it. But Edgar Cayce, the man who could see beyond the veil of ordinary consciousness, said that in those exact moments, in those automatic, thoughtless hours, you were shaping something far more permanent than your day. You were carving patterns into the fabric of reality itself. And scientists are now seeing evidence that suggests he may have been right. Cayce didn't call himself a prophet. He called himself a photographer of the unseen. Between 1901 and 1945, Willie in self-induced trance states. He gave over 14,000 readings, detailed accounts of health conditions, past lives, future events, and the hidden mechanics of human consciousness. Most of his contemporaries dismissed him, but his files, preserved at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, contain warnings that align disturbingly well with discoveries being made in laboratories today. Warnings about how your thoughts don't just stay in your head, how your emotions don't just fade, how the smallest choice you make each morning reverberates through layers of existence you can't perceive. If you're watching this, you should probably subscribe, because what comes next changes how you see everything. Cayce said the mind is not confined to the brain. He described it as a field, an atmosphere that surrounds you, that bleeds into the space around you, that touches other minds without your knowledge. He called it the mental plane. He said every thought you have sends a ripple through this plane, like a stone dropped into water, and those ripples don't disappear. They accumulate. They build structures. Modern neuroscience has no name for this. But researchers studying quantum coherence in microtubules, the tiny scaffolding inside your neurons, are finding that consciousness may not be locked inside your skull. Studies from the University of Arizona and others suggest that information may be stored and accessed across fields we can't measure yet. Cayce said this 80 years ago. He said your anger from this morning is still out there, circulating, influencing. You think you're alone in your head. You're not. Not. That's the first warning. Cayce insisted that thought is contagious, not metaphorically. Literally, he described how a person dwelling on fear, resentment, or judgment sends out a vibrational signature that others unconsciously pick up. He said, you walk into a room, and before you speak, people feel what you've been thinking. You pass someone on the street, and your unspoken bitterness brushes against them. They don't know why they suddenly feel heavy. Neither do you. But you just transferred something. Modern psychology calls this emotional contagion, and studies confirm it happens. Mirror neurons fire in response to observed emotions. Stress hormones shift in proximity to anxious people. But Cayce went further. He said this contagion doesn't stop at the living. He said your mental patterns imprint on objects, on places, on the air itself. Then there's the second warning. Cayce said most people are not living their own lives. They're living the lives their thoughts have constructed for them. He explained that the subconscious mind, that deep, dark reservoir beneath your awareness, is constantly running scripts. Scripts written by trauma, by repetition, by things you were told as a child. And these scripts play out automatically, every single day. Unless you intervene, you think you're choosing what to eat, what to say, how to react. But Cayce said no. You're not choosing. You're repeating. The subconscious is executing commands you gave it years ago, or commands someone else gave it, and you've forgotten they're even running. Neuroscience now backs this up. Studies show that up to 95% of your daily decisions are made unconsciously. Your conscious mind, the part of you that feels like you, is just narrating a story after the fact. So when you snapped at your partner this morning, was that really you? Or was that a pattern installed a decade ago, running on autopilot? Cayce said you wouldn't know the difference until you learned to observe yourself, until you stopped identifying with every impulse. But here's the twist. He also said that once you start observing, once you start seeing the scripts, you'll realize something terrifying. You'll realize that some of those scripts didn't come from you at all. They came from outside, from the mental atmosphere, from the collective unconscious, from what he called the race mind, the accumulated fear, greed, hatred, and delusion of humanity itself, swirling around you, pressing into you, whispering suggestions. You think your thoughts are yours. Most of them aren't. That's the second warning. Cayce described the race mind as a kind of psychic smog. He said humanity has been thinking the same destructive thoughts for so long that they've created a dense, oppressive field. A field of war, of scarcity, of separation. And unless you consciously rise above it, you're breathing it in. You're marinating in it. Every time you watch the news and feel that tightness in your chest. Every time you scroll social media and compare yourself. Every time you lie awake at night worrying about money, status, survival. That's not original thinking. That's the race mind thinking through you. And Cayce said, the more you engage with it, the more you feed it. The more you feed it, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the harder it is to escape. But then something strange happened in his readings. Cayce would sometimes pause mid-center and say something like, this entity is under the influence of, and he'd name a thought pattern. Not a spirit, not a demon, a thought pattern. He said certain thoughts, especially thoughts of hatred, vengeance, or self-pity, can become so concentrated, so charged with emotion, that they take on a kind of semi-autonomous existence. They linger, they attach, they influence. Modern psychology has no framework for this, but researchers studying intrusive thoughts, obsessive-compulsive loops, and trauma re-experiencing are finding that certain neural patterns do seem to run independently of conscious will. They fire on their own. They recruit other thoughts. They resist extinction, Cayce said. Cayce said these are thought forms, and he said, you create them every day. Now the warnings start to layer. Because Cayce didn't just say your thoughts affect you. He said they affect everything. He said the reason you keep encountering the same problems, the same types of people, the same frustrations, is because you're broadcasting a signal. Your mental and emotional state is a frequency, and reality responds to it. He called this the law of attraction, but not in the way it's sold in self-help books. He wasn't talking about visualizing a car and having it appear. He was talking about something darker. He said, if you carry fear, you will magnetize circumstances that justify fear. If you carry resentment, you will attract situations that confirm your resentment. Not because the universe is punishing you, because you're tuning into a channel, and the channel is always broadcasting content that matches its frequency. Modern physics offers a strange parallel. Quantum experiments show that observation affects outcome. The famous double-slit experiment demonstrates that particles behave differently when watched. Researchers at institutions like Princeton's Pear Lab spent decades studying whether human intention could influence random number generators. The data suggested it could, barely, subtly, but consistently. Cayce said the effect isn't subtle at all. He said your sustained focus, especially when charged with emotion, bends probability. It tips the scales. Not every time. Not mechanically bad. Over time, the pattern becomes undeniable. You expect betrayal, and people betray you. You expect failure, and failure finds you. Not because you're cursed, because you're coherent. But here's the third reversal. Cayce also said this works in reverse. He said the same mechanism that traps you can free you. He said that a single, sustained, emotionally charged thought of healing, of forgiveness, of love, can rewrite everything. But, and this is critical, it has to be sustained. It has to be repeated. It has to become the dominant frequency. And most people can't do it. Because the race mind is louder. Because the subconscious scripts are older. Because changing your frequency means sitting in the discomfort of not reacting, not defending, not collapsing into the familiar pattern. It means watching yourself want to be angry and choosing stillness instead. Watching yourself want to be afraid and choosing trust. And that, Cayce said, is the hardest thing a human being can do. He warned that the modern world is designed to make it nearly impossible. He said the pace of life, the noise, the constant stimulation, the endless demands, all of it prevents you from ever dropping into the stillness where real change happens. And remember, Cayce said this in the 1930s and 40s, before smartphones, before the internet, before 24-hour news cycles. He could see it coming. He said humanity was accelerating toward a threshold where people would be so fragmented, so overstimulated, so identified with the outer noise, that they would completely lose contact with the inner silence. And in that silence, he said, is where you actually are. The real you, not the reactive, defensive, fear-based persona. The quiet awareness underneath. Scientists are now documenting what happens when people lose that contact. Rates of anxiety, depression, and dissociation are climbing. Attention spans are collapsing. Studies from Harvard and other institutions show that the average person spends almost 50% of their waking hours in a state of mind-wandering, not present, not aware, just running mental loops. And during that mind-wandering, people report being significantly less happy. Cayce would say that's because, when you're not present, you're in the race mind. You're in the scripts, you're in the frequency of fear. And that frequency is heavy. It drags you down. It makes everything harder. But then Cayce introduced another warning, one that most people overlook. He said it's not enough to change your thoughts. You also have to change what you consume. He didn't mean food, though he talked about that too. He meant information. Images, words. He said everything you take in through your senses leaves a residue, a vibrational imprint. He described how watching violence, even fictional violence, etches a pattern into your subconscious. How listening to gossip, even passively, tunes you into the frequency of judgment. How surrounding yourself with beauty, with harmony, with uplifting sound and color gradually lifts your entire mental atmosphere. Modern neuroscience confirms this through neuroplasticity. What you repeatedly expose yourself to literally reshapes your brain. But Cayce said it goes deeper. He said it reshapes your energy body, your aura, the field around you that others sense. He warned that most people are completely unconscious of this. They binge-watch crime shows, scroll through outrage-filled feeds, listen to angry music, and then wonder why they feel anxious all the time. Cayce said you're feeding your subconscious a steady diet of chaos and then expecting it to produce peace. It doesn't work that way. The subconscious is obedient. It takes what you give it and builds a world from that material. If you give it fear, it builds a fearful world. If you give it beauty, it builds a beautiful one. But here's the problem. Today's mind, the culture, the algorithm, they're all optimized to feed you fear. Because fear is sticky, fear keeps you watching. Fear keeps you scrolling. Fear keeps you buying. And Cayce said that as long as you're plugged into that stream, you'll never be free. Now we arrive at the fourth warning. And this one cuts the deepest. Cayce said that everything you do to another person, you are doing to yourself. Not metaphorically, not eventually, in some far-off karmic reckoning. Right now. In the moment, he explained that because all consciousness is connected, because the mental plane is a unified field, there is no true separation between you and anyone else. When you judge someone, you are judging yourself. When you hurt someone, you are hurting yourself. When you forgive someone, you are freeing yourself. He said this is not a moral teaching. It's a mechanical reality, a law as reliable as gravity. And modern research into mirror neurons, empathy circuits, and the neuroscience of social pain supports this. Studies show that watching someone in pain activates the same brain regions as experiencing pain yourself. Holding a grudge produces the same stress hormones as being attacked. Compassion activates the same reward centers as receiving kindness. Cayce said the reason most people suffer is not because of what's happening to them. It's because of what they're doing to others, consciously or unconsciously, and then experiencing the echo. He said every critical thought you have about someone else is a wound you're inflicting on your own psyche. Every time you gossip, every time you withhold love, every time you silently wish someone would fail, you are programming your subconscious to expect criticism, isolation, and failure. and it will deliver. Not because the universe is punishing you, because you're punishing yourself. The subconscious doesn't distinguish between self and other. It just records the emotional tone and replicates it. This is where the warnings become almost unbearable, because Cayce is saying that you are doing this to yourself all day, every day, without realizing it. That little flash of superiority you felt when someone made a mistake, that quiet satisfaction when a rival struggled, that moment of irritation when someone interrupted you, each one is a signal, a command, a seed, and the subconscious is planting it. And one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, you'll experience the exact thing you silently wished on someone else, and you won't connect the dots. You'll think it's random, you'll think it's unfair, but Cayce said it's not. It's precise, it's lawful, it's the echo. But here's the twist again. Cayce also said this is the doorway to total transformation. Because if your thoughts and emotions are creating your reality, then changing them changes everything. He said, the moment you truly grasp this, not intellectually, but experientially, you gain access to a kind of power that most people never touch. The power to forgive and feel the shackles fall off. The power to bless someone and feel your own heart lighten. The power to withdraw judgment and watch your world soften. He said, this is what the mystics knew. This is what the saints practiced. Not because they were holy, because they understood the mechanics. And scientists are beginning to see traces of this. Research into heart coherence, conducted by the HeartMath Institute, shows that sustained feelings of gratitude and compassion produce measurable changes in heart rhythms, which in turn influence brain function, immune response, and even the electromagnetic field around the body. Studies on loving-kindness meditation show structural changes in the brain after just 8 weeks. Increased gray matter in regions associated with empathy and emotional regulation. Decreased activity in the amygdala, the fear center. Cayce described all of this in the 1930s, using different language, but pointing to the same reality. He said your heart is not just a pump. It's a broadcaster, and what it broadcasts shapes the field around you. Now the warnings converge into a single, inescapable truth. Cayce said the reason your life looks the way it does is because of what you've been broadcasting, consciously and unconsciously, for years, maybe decades. And the reason you feel stuck is because you keep broadcasting the same signal. You keep thinking the same thoughts. You keep reacting the same way. You keep feeding the same patterns. And the subconscious, obedient as ever, keeps building the same reality. He said most people live their entire lives in this loop. They die without ever realizing they had a choice, without ever realizing that the prison was made of their own thoughts and the door was never locked. But here's the final, most disturbing warning. Cayce said that even if you wake up, even if you see the pattern, even if you start to change the race, mind will resist. The old scripts will fight back. The people around you, who are unconsciously invested in the old version of you, will try to pull you back. Not out of malice, out of resonance. Because when you change your frequency, you stop matching theirs. And that dissonance is uncomfortable. So they'll criticize, they'll mock, they'll dismiss, they'll tell you you're being naive, delusional, irresponsible. And if you're not anchored in your own knowing, you'll believe them. You'll collapse back into the old frequency. And the pattern will continue. Cayce said this is why spiritual progress is so rare. Not because it's complicated, because it requires you to stand alone, to trust your inner knowing over the outer noise, to keep choosing love when everything around you is choosing fear, to keep choosing presence when the world is optimized for distraction, to keep choosing stillness when the race mind is screaming. And very few people have the endurance for that. Very few people are willing to feel the discomfort of not reacting, not defending, not collapsing into the familiar. So they stay in the loop, and the loop becomes their life. And yet, Cayce also said something else. He said that the very fact that you're asking these questions, that you're reading these words, that something inside you is stirring, that's not random, he said. The soul calls to itself that when you're ready, when the accumulated pain of the old pattern finally outweighs the fear of change, something shifts, a door opens, and you find yourself here, reading this, feeling this, knowing that something has to change. He said, that's the beginning. Not the answer, the beginning. Because the warnings aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to wake you up, to show you that you're not a victim of circumstance, you're not a leaf in the wind, you're a frequency generator, a reality sculptor, a walking, breathing, thinking broadcast tower. And every single day, with every thought, every word, every emotion, you're shaping the world you'll wake up in tomorrow. Cayce said most people don't realize this until it's too late, until they're old, looking back, wondering why nothing ever changed. But you're realizing it now, and that changes everything. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Cayce didn't give formulas. He didn't give steps. He gave principles, and the first principle is this: observe. Watch yourself. Watch your thoughts, like you're watching a movie. Don't judge them. Don't fight them. Just watch. Because the moment you become the observer, you're no longer the prisoner. You're no longer the script. You're the awareness behind it. And that awareness, Cayce said, is the real you. The part that doesn't die. The part that's been here all along, waiting for you to notice. And once you notice, once you start observing, the second principle activates. Choose, not impulsively, not reactively, but consciously, deliberately. You feel the old anger rising, and you choose stillness. You feel the old fear creeping in, and you choose trust. You feel the old judgment forming, and you choose curiosity. And at first, it feels impossible. The old patterns are so strong. The race mind is so loud. But Cayce said, if you keep choosing, if you keep observing and choosing, something starts to shift. The subconscious starts to listen. The frequency starts to change. The field around you starts to clear. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your reality begins to reflect the new signal. But it's not fast. It's not dramatic. Cayce warned against expecting miracles. He said, change happens in the invisible first, in the mental plane, in the energy body, and only after sustained, consistent repetition does it begin to show up in the physical. He said, most people give up right before the breakthrough. They choose differently for a week, a month, and when nothing changes, they assume it doesn't work. They go back to the old pattern, and the cycle continues. But he said if you endure, if you hold the new frequency long enough, the outer world has no choice but to reorganize, because the outer world is just a mirror. And when you change what's being reflected, the mirror changes too. Now, here's what Cayce didn't say, but what his readings imply. He didn't say this would make your life easy. He didn't say you'd suddenly get everything you want. He said you'd get everything you need. And sometimes what you need is the very thing you've been avoiding. The confrontation, the loss, the stripping away of the false. Because the soul doesn't want comfort. It wants growth. And growth, Cayce said, only happens under pressure. So if you start changing your frequency and your life seems to get harder, that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. That's a sign you're doing it right. The old structures are collapsing. The old patterns are being challenged. And it's uncomfortable. But on the other side of that discomfort is the life you've been trying to think your way into. Cayce said the modern world has taught you to distrust. Discomfort to medicate Italiano, to distract yourself from it. But discomfort is the signal that something real is happening, that you're no longer numb, no longer asleep. He said the soul speaks through discomfort, through restlessness, through the quiet, persistent feeling that something is off, something is missing, something needs to change. And most people spend their entire lives trying to silence that feeling. But Cayce said if you listen to it, if you follow it, it will lead you home. Not to a place, to yourself, to the part of you that's been buried under years of conditioning, fear, and noise. And this is where the warnings come full circle. Because Cayce said the biggest danger isn't that you'll fail, it's that you'll succeed at the wrong thing, that you'll spend your entire life climbing a ladder only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. that you'll achieve everything the race mind told you to achieve: the money, the status, the validation, and still feel empty, because none of it was yours. It was the script. It was the frequency you inherited, and deep down, you always knew it. But you didn't have the courage to stop and ask, what do I actually want? What does my soul want? Cayce said that question is the most important question you'll ever ask, and the answer won't come from your mind. It won't come from logic or analysis or comparison. It will come from the stillness, from the place where the noise stops. And to access that place, you have to be willing to sit with yourself, to be bored, to be uncomfortable, to feel the withdrawal symptoms of distraction, because you're addicted. Everyone is. To the noise, to the stimulation, to the constant mental motion that keeps you from ever having to face the quiet. And in that quiet, Cayce said, you'll find something you've been avoiding. You'll find that you're not who you thought you were, that the story you've been telling yourself, the identity you've been defending, is just another script, another thought form, and it's been running you. But it's not you. The real you is underneath, watching, waiting. And it doesn't need validation. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need anything from the outer world, because it's already whole, already complete, already free. But to access it, you have to be willing to let go of everything you think you know, everything you think you need, everything you think you are. And that, Cayce said, is the real death. Not the death of the body, the death of the false self, the ego, the persona, the mask you've been wearing for so long you forgot it wasn't your face. And most people would rather die physically than face that death, because it's terrifying. Because if you're not the story, if you're not the identity, then who are you? Cayce said, you're the awareness, the observer, the quiet presence that's been here all along, beneath every thought, every emotion, every experience. And that presence is indestructible. It doesn't age. It doesn't fear. It doesn't need. It just is. And when you finally stop running, when you finally stop seeking, when you finally drop into that presence, everything changes. Not because your circumstances change, because you change. And the world, being a mirror, changes with you. But here's the warning. He kept repeating, you can't fake this. You can't think your way into it. You can't visualize it, or affirm it, or manifest it. You have to become it. And becoming, it requires you to live it. Every day, in every moment, in every reaction. It requires you to catch yourself before you judge, to pause before you react, to breathe before you speak, to choose love when fear is screaming. And it's exhausting. At first, because you're going against decades of conditioning. But Cayce said if you persist, it becomes natural. It becomes who you are. And that's when the magic happens. Not the magic of getting what you want, the magic of no longer needing to want. So what is it you're doing every day that Cayce warned about? You're thinking. You're reacting. You're judging. You're fearing. You're absorbing. You're broadcasting. And all of it is shaping your reality in ways you can't see. Until now. Now you see it. Now you know. And knowing changes everything. Because you can't unknow this. You can ignore it. You can deny it. You can go back to sleep. But somewhere, deep down, you'll always know. You'll always feel the tension between the life you're living and the life you could be living. Between the frequency you're stuck in and the frequency you're capable of. And maybe that tension is the point. Maybe it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Maybe it's supposed to keep you awake at night, wondering, questioning, reaching. Because that's the soul calling. And Cayce said the soul never stops calling. It will keep whispering, keep nudging, keep showing you signs until you finally listen. Or until you die. Whichever comes first, and you're still here, still reading, still feeling something stir, which means you're listening. But the question remains, what will you do now that you've heard it?